Okay. We can grab a seat, call our speakers up. Our final session today is on the Building Energy Exchange organizations and the efforts that they are making in Kansas City and St. Louis. Not to steal any thunder, but in a lot of what we've talked about there, I'm sure you've seen some overlap, you've seen some gaps, you've seen some opportunity for coordination and wondered why it wasn't happening. I believe that these three ladies up here today should be sharing with you the evolution of organizations in St. Louis and Kansas City that are going to help fill those gaps, make connections where they can be, make it easier for commercial entities to get the job done, to make the changes they need to bend those curves that we saw, to save them money, implement new technologies, and do it in an innovative way that helps the municipalities, the utilities, the ratepayers, the community, the state, and the world as a whole. So there is no pressure whatsoever on you at all. Yes. But with that, I have with us today, Brittany Giroux, correct? Drew, sorry, I apologize. Brittany Drew, Building Performance Manager for Metropolitan Energy Center. Ashley Sadowski, the Executive Director of the Building Energy Exchange in Kansas City. And Jessica Deem, the Interim Director at the Building Energy Exchange in St. Louis. Kicking us off today is Brittany. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Clicker is right here. Okay, gotcha.
And down is forward.
Okay, awesome. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I know it'll be a struggle to stay awake. This is the last thing, but please bear with us. All right. Okay, my name is Brittany Giroux, and I am the Building Performance Associate, not yet manager, but maybe one day, we'll see. Degree in Environmental Studies from Vanderbilt University. Prior to this job at Metropolitan Energy Center, I worked in the Office of Sustainability in my hometown of Evanston, Illinois, just a bit north of Chicago, and I currently co-manage the benchmarking program and Healthy Housing Task Force at Metropolitan Energy Center. And yes, I love what I do. So next slide. Just a little bit about Metropolitan Energy Center. We are almost a 40-year-old energy efficiency nonprofit in Kansas City, Missouri. And essentially, we provide resources, outreach, and training. So alternative fuels are no longer alternative, and energy efficiency becomes commonplace. So under our different departments, we have our Energy Solutions Hub, which does education, outreach, and offers technical assistance for commercial and residential buildings in Kansas City. We also utilize our Project Living Proof demonstration house, which is basically this 100-year-old building that was completely gutted and renovated, and we use it to do public outreach and education about what you can do to make your home more efficient for the general public in Kansas City. So that's another branch of our organization. We do hope to expand our services this year. And, you know, I'm not technically in charge of anything transportation related, but we do have another arm of our organization. We do run the Kansas City and Central Kansas Clean City Coalitions and have been doing so for quite some time now. If you have any questions about sustainable transportation concerning electric vehicles, charging infrastructure, alternative fuels, definitely let us know and we can you know, help you out there. All right, so the Energy Solutions Hub, it was established in 2018 to be a full service resource to our community. And we provide information and support for healthy and sustainable buildings. We do service residents and commercial businesses in our region. So on the right-hand side, you will see a bit of our services that we provide. So we do commercial building and benchmarking support, which is one of the larger things that we do at our organization. We assist the city of Kansas City, Missouri, with their benchmarking program. So any building that is over 50,000 square feet needs to submit their energy and water data to the city. So we help them with that compliance by doing outreach to building owners and then help them in the next stage once they've benchmarked. We offer trainings for Energy Star portfolio manager and some technical assistance with Mary. She has over 15 years in this industry. She was an energy auditor, ran her own business. So we've got a lot of different great minds at this org. We also offer, like I mentioned, information and education. And another thing that we do, a bigger thing that we do at our organization includes codes training. So last week we actually had part 4 of our codes training. Half of it was pertaining to residential structures, and then the other half was pertaining to commercial structures. And we had a bunch of policy and building code managers throughout the region in the KC region come and learn, and it was great, very well received. So we are happy to continue providing training for professionals in our region. And at the end of the presentation, I'll share a little bit about our upcoming events. And we also do some data capture and sharing of information between different organizations, such as these lovely ladies here at the front. Great. So historical versus the changing attitudes pertaining to building performance. I mean, when you think about building performance, a lot of people are just thinking, oh, you know, making my building more efficient is only going to save me a couple bucks on, you know, my utility bill. It's elitist. It's expensive to implement. You know, it's especially in this climate, it could be partisan, you know, and it's complicated, boring. Nobody wants to hear about energy efficiency. But in today's age, it's so important now more than ever that we do incorporate energy efficiency into our new constructed buildings, as well as doing a lot of retro commissioning and retrofitting to our current buildings. So the reasons why that is because energy efficiency and making our buildings better has a serious impact on occupant health. It is a path to equity and equality, because I'm going to get to this later on, but a lot of people in Kansas City are renters and they don't necessarily have a lot of control over, you know, how their building's made and how it's maintained. So that's definitely a reason why we need building performance and energy efficiency. Also, it is not so expensive to implement. In fact, it's probably even more expensive if we do not retrofit our buildings and construct them with the latest and greatest technology. It's unifying and universal. I mean, everybody needs a place to sleep, everybody goes somewhere to work. So it's really critical that we are investing in our buildings. And, you know, to many people might not be interesting, but I think to everyone in this room, energy efficiency is really interesting and you can get kind of creative with it. So next slide. All right, so I mentioned a little bit about data capture and sharing, and through the Energy Solutions Hub, we do kind of have an informal partnership with Children's Mercy Hospital, and we will be doing some research into the connection between energy efficiency and occupant health. In the past, our organization worked in tandem with Children's Mercy Hospital and other organizations to retrofit homes of children that were suffering with asthma and other respiratory illnesses. So we're going to be continuing that study to see if there was any correlation between retrofitting buildings and occupant health. You know, less visits to the emergency room, decreased costs for medical issues. So that's something that we're doing in tandem with the University of Missouri, Kansas City Center for Neighborhoods. We also have our sustainable or green housing task force, healthy housing task force that we also do with Children's Mercy Hospital. So that's some of the data capture and sharing that we do. And then for our benchmarking support, like I mentioned, we assist and are contracted with the city of Kansas City, Missouri to help them increase the number of buildings that comply with the Energy Empowerment Ordinance. And, we are one of the, how do I say that, spearheaders of the Climate Action Plan to implement some of the building initiatives. And pertaining to benchmarking, we do have our concierge service. We have some customer service reps that take calls from building owners throughout the region, and they're great. So we are very lucky to have them and lucky to have them on our team. All right, so best building practices are mitigating or preventing heat loss. So, losing heat through these thermal bridges, through the metal stud framing, it's really essential that we, build correctly and build for the future. As you've seen, tons of extreme weather events, a lot of power outages if we don't have the right infrastructure, and also poor indoor air quality, can happen if we don't have the right, mechanical ventilation to filter indoor and outdoor air contaminants. So that's another reason why we need energy efficiency in our buildings. And like I mentioned, the reason why it's so important for the Kansas City region is because we have a ton of aging buildings. A lot of our buildings are decades old, some even over 100 years old. So that these buildings are not as efficient as they could be. And within our region, buildings generate about 60% of the city's greenhouse gas emissions. And like I mentioned earlier, almost 50% of our city are renters. And so that really, the need for energy efficiency is so great because people don't have the power to be in charge of what their home looks like. Like myself, I'm a renter, and I have to do some things in my home to make it more energy efficient, and to keep the heat in the winter and keep the cooling in the summer. So that's definitely something that's personal to me, as I'm a renter as well. And our city's greenhouse gas emissions is 20 percentage points higher than the national average. So really, really, really critical that we address energy efficiency in our city. All right, so we're gonna get a little bit into housing and utility costs. And within our city, we are the 7th highest city in the US for energy spending. So the amount of money that you're spending on your utilities compared to your monthly, your weekly income, that's pretty high because Kansas City is the 38th largest city in the country. So for us to be 7th is not a great thing. And for renter households, we are the 6th highest for energy burden. People spending on average 6.1% of their income on utility bills. All right, and if you look to your right, there is the graph of the percentage of households that are cost burden, and you can see that the burden really falls on our residents that make less than $20,000, less than $30,000. So it's critical if we want to be doing building efficiency and decarbonization through an equity lens that we address this issue for renters and low-income households. All right, so technical and problem-solving assistance. We do, like I mentioned, have a concierge service for building owners and operators for energy upgrades. We are currently creating a contractor list for our region so that we can say to building owners or other folks that want to do energy upgrades, like, hey, these are people that are vetted and great to work with to improve your building. So that's something we're working on right now. We also help promote the building operator support and training facilitation. And then we also hold workshops and marketing, and we market other activities hosted by MEC partners. So we've done things with MIA in the past. Well, there's so many MIAs. We've done things with MIA, Building Energy Exchange, so many other great people in the energy space. So we definitely want to be a collaborative organization so that we can reach our climate goals for the city. And one thing that we really want to hit home is the fact that energy efficiency will improve occupant health and safety. So this is a photo from one of our staff members when they were, out in the field. They saw some black mold growth within walls. And, this is due to leaky buildings and condensation within the walls. And, people say that it's expensive to make our buildings right the first time, but we say that it's even more expensive to fix these problems where you have to just gut the entire thing and clean these walls out. So occupant health and safety is super important just because we spend about 90% of our time indoors and, possibly even more now, considering the circumstances. So the invisible benefit. So kind of adding on to the last slide, energy efficiency in buildings can improve indoor air quality. And when you improve indoor air quality, it reduces the complaints that you get about indoor air quality, reduces employee turnover, increases productivity, reduces healthcare costs, reduces sick leave, and, possibly could reduce claims for people going to the hospital on account of poor indoor air quality. So these are some of the invisible benefits that you get from energy efficiency and great building practices. Oops. All right, so almost done here. Benchmarking is the launch pad to better buildings. So essentially, the why do we care? Well, we care for some of these reasons: mitigating heat loss or gain through the building envelope, making use of current technologies to improve energy used by HVAC equipment, lighting, and other plug loads. We increase our indoor air quality for building occupants. We're modernizing our built environment to increase communication between systems, which will lead to proactive and less expensive action for maintenance and any needed troubleshooting. And lastly, recognizing that our buildings are infrastructure and they need to be, improved for the future, for right now. So that's a couple of reasons why we should care. So as you can see through this presentation, better buildings are connected to everything. I mean, saves you money, increases the health of your occupants, it increases equity, it can create jobs in our region, which is so needed, and not just any jobs, very good quality jobs that lead to careers. And it raises our city's profile to say that we are a sustainable city and we care about our residents being healthy and in places that they want to live. All right, like I mentioned, we do have some upcoming events. So if you're in the Kansas City region, definitely feel free to sign up for these. They're free. We have an ARC, an Energy Star Portfolio Manager training session showing how these programs interact and how they can be best used by building owners or anyone really who's interested. We're doing that in tandem with the USGBC. That's on the 18th of August. We also have our part 4 of our IECC codes training for building code inspectors on August 25th. And lastly, we have our Energy Action Day on October 1st. We're gonna have some speakers, food trucks, an EV display, and tours of our Project Living Proof building. So if you have any questions, my manager's information is on the bottom. And yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Right. Thank you, Brittany. You can tell from that discussion that we talk a lot about the why we do this because everyone here knows why energy efficiency is so awesome, but you go out into the rest of the state, the rest of the city in our case, and you have to make arguments in a number of different ways. So that's so important. Thank you, Brittany. So I'm going to talk about the Building Energy Exchange in Kansas City. I'm just curious by a show of hands how many people are familiar with the term Building Energy Exchange, have worked with folks in St. Louis or Kansas City, or might be familiar with one in New York. Is that, yeah, so a handful of folks. Okay, great. Okay, so for everyone else who's not familiar with us, I'm going to give you a little bit of a origin story here. So the Building Energy Exchange came from a lot of the work that was done with Climate Action KC, at least speaking for the Kansas City side. So a few years ago, Climate Action KC got together a lot of regional leaders, primarily our elected officials on both the Kansas and Missouri side, really looked at the need to address climate in an immediate, coordinated, and visionary way. You can see there was a lot of momentum and energy that came from those conversations. This is from our 2019 Climate Summit. Maybe? It's down, but I don't know. Okay. No, I did it already. Let's see. I don't know. Travis, sorry, I might have you advance. Yeah, sorry about that. So what came out of that energy ultimately led to a regional climate action plan that, with the help of the Mid-America Regional Council, got over 150 elected leaders and over 1,000 volunteers touched this plan in some way. MEC was also a part of this. A lot of different agencies participated. It included things like buildings, but also included things like local food production and green infrastructure, renewables, etc. Oh, that worked. Okay. And one of the things that that plan did was there was some research that came at the beginning of that plan's development. And one of the things was a greenhouse gas inventory, which showed that 63% of Kansas City's metro area greenhouse gas emissions come from buildings alone, which is fairly common for urban areas. Somewhere between 60 to 70% is oftentimes cited as where buildings contribute. So that really set the tone that if we're going to do something about our climate goals, we need to meaningfully engage with the real estate sector. So this is a helpful diagram that was created by our friends at the Urban Land Institute. If you're not familiar with Urban Land Institute, they've been a great partner of ours. They work with a number of folks who are in the real estate industry on transformative real estate solutions, most recently being their move towards building decarbonization. So we've worked with them on a number of different things. This handy dandy chart really shows, maybe at the risk of oversimplifying, when they talk to real estate investors who are looking at moving their portfolio to net zero, what is the path to get there? And as we all know, again, preaching to the choir, energy efficiency is the first step in that. You're not going to be able to get to net zero if you just talk about renewables or any of the other pieces. You have to first start with energy efficiency. So I'm happy to say that that's a message that we say. It's also a big part of our initiatives and where we put resources. So just wanted to emphasize that. So we also have what would be called a P3 approach, which is bringing together the public and private sector. So I will clarify, because there's been a lot of discussions today on the residential versus commercial. Building Energy Exchange is more focused on commercial, which includes multifamily, but more on the larger property owners, folks that are housing a number of people or running business, have, you know, some pretty sophisticated tenant relationships there. And that we are trying to bring together all of those people in that ecosystem to work with our public sector, which includes regional bodies, city government, utilities, civic leaders, and other nonprofits. Okay, so you can see, just to kind of expand on who we mean by these public sector partners, on the left, you can see a number of people that we've collaborated with over this past year. So I don't know if I mentioned this at the top, we started about a little over a year ago. So we're a fairly new organization. And in that time, we've really just tried to figure out who the right partners are, who's already at the table, who's already doing the great work, where can we fill in, where can we build alignment and amplify all the good things that are already happening. So you can see a number of people that we've already engaged with so far. We are also, oh, that came in a little weird. We are also really fortunate that we have a number of partners and mentors in this space. So the Building Energy Exchange in New York has been around for over a decade, provides a number of technical resources to the New York City greater metropolitan area. Some of those resources can be curated and brought to our individual markets here in Kansas City as well as St. Louis. We work with NRDC, Institute for Market Transformation, ULI mentioned as well, Elevate, and NYSEG, which is the nation's first green bank, which is in New York City. Okay, so we try to bring all these different people to the table. So we're trying to bring private sector, public sector. It's a lot of folks in the room. But the important piece is like, what are all those folks doing when they get there? And we call it cultivating the building decarbonization ecosystem, which is what are all the activities that surround that as a region? And when we say region, we're talking about 10 counties on both sides of the state line. How are we all activating and moving the needle on all these things? So that includes activities like education activities. Brittany alluded to some of those that are happening at MEC and other partners. Research, so making sure whatever we're doing is actually targeted, not just in terms of our greenhouse gas emission studies, but also in terms of equity and who we're putting resources towards and who needs those the most as we transition. The other piece is technical assistance. How are we providing that hand holding, helping building owners to make this a really simple process? Even though we're talking about commercial building owners, which I'm sure some folks who work with single family think, oh, well, that's an easier market to deal with. It's still very hard to get somebody to say yes and actually decide to make those improvements. So that's a big part of it. Training the workforce, getting them to be in a position to do the work that we've talked about today. And then finance structures, having new means to finance, finding gaps in those markets, and how can we create new financial tools. So that's a lot. And I just thought I'd touch on where the places we've planted the seeds are over the last year, a little over a year. And that includes education pieces, training workforce, and finance. Okay, so the first is what we call our building decarbonization toolkits. So these, if you go to our website, www.bxkc.org, just a promotion of the website. We worked really hard on it, put a lot of initiatives. I'll speak for Jessica as well, worked with BX St. Louis on putting together a lot of the initiatives, the technical information. So please check that out and just get a better sense of what we're doing. Subscribe and follow to social media. But I will point out that one of the resources that we have on there is these technical primers, which folks in this room, you may have a familiarity with what are all the parts and pieces when we say net zero or we say high performance building. But if you have someone who's like, what does that even mean? This is the building blocks for that. It says, you can do everything from upgrade your windows to replace your roof insulation to any myriad of HVAC and mechanical solutions, and gives them a 3 to 4 page primer on what that means. What are some of those cost benefits of doing those things? And then secondly, this is more in line with the workforce development piece. So it was interesting to hear the conversation earlier about utility and needing that extra workforce and getting some more people online. So this kind of speaks to that in some small part. We are working with the Kauffman Foundation, which provides a lot of, if you're familiar with the Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City, they promote a lot of entrepreneurship programs. We really wanted to position this workforce program to be essentially an entrepreneurship program, growing MBE firms to better grow their firm to accommodate this kind of work. So part of the program, it's kind of two parts. One is supporting them to grow their business in all the ways that you would want a construction firm to grow their business, helping them manage their risk, giving them 40 hours of back office support, estimating services, accounting services, all the things that make sure that they can have a healthy business. And then we couple that with business coaching and what's called a clean energy growth plan to take their existing scope of work and say, okay, how do we pair that scope of work with what the new clean energy scope would be to move you into that transition. So there's a picture of a few of we have 4 construction firms in our first cohort, and we'll have our next cohort in January. If you are in the Kansas City area and you know of contractors that would be interested in this program, please let us know. Okay, so the last initiative, as I mentioned, is about financing. So one of the things that we heard, and we've heard today a lot of different opportunities to finance projects, was that multifamily housing is just a really hard nut to crack when it comes to financing. So we decided that we were going to take a swing at it. One of the ways we thought we could do it is by creating a regional green bank in the Kansas City area. We call it an energy efficiency investment fund. The idea is to build diverse capital, bring it together to fund energy efficiency improvements for building upgrades in multifamily housing, and including in new construction as well. So one of the ways that we got the ball moving on this was we brought together our partners at ULI and put together a technical assistance, which was conducted this past March. This technical assistance panel, basically, it's a 2.5-day charrette. You put people in a room for 2.5 days, you shut the door and you say, how do you create a roadmap for this? They meet with a number of stakeholders over that first day. Locally, we actually had a dozen panelists. You can see their beautiful faces there on the right. 6 of them were local to Kansas City. They understood the market. They understood the equity considerations of multifamily housing. And then the other 6 came nationally. So they came from cities where they themselves had started their own green banks. We had representatives from Connecticut, DC, New York, etc. And we asked them to look at this regional green bank, and knowing that it was 2.5 days, we knew that, especially for the folks that were out of town, we weren't going to be able to get them to understand regionally what's going on, you know, in totality. So we said, well, can you focus on the cities of Overland Park, Kansas, and the city of Kansas City, Missouri as sort of your foils between what happens on the Kansas side versus what happens on the Missouri side. One's much more suburban, the other is more urban, as a way to just better understand. So we gave them a site tour of both of those cities, obviously a whirlwind exercise, but was just a really fun way to get people to focus on this and get a lot of smart people in the room for 2.5 days. So this is just a chart just to explain in very simple terms what we're talking about. So capital pool of private, public, philanthropic funding. I just want to point out philanthropic is kind of an unusual place here because we're talking about healthy, energy efficient, affordable housing. Now you're starting to bring in some of these national philanthropies that are interested in housing and interested in health. So just wanted to point that out. So coupling that capital pool with a process that involves residents, building owners, and energy efficiency professionals, getting all those folks at the table, developing a process that is streamlined but has some accountability to the needs of all of those stakeholders. And ultimately ending with a competitive lending product or series of lending products for affordable housing providers, which can catalyze a market for buildings and making upgrades for these affordable housing units. So I will oversimplify this because I really feel like the panel did such a great job over those 2.5 days and then the subsequent months afterwards to put together this final report, which was released in June. If you get a copy of the PowerPoint, I strongly encourage you to check out the report. You can also find it on our website. Gives you a really robust understanding of what we're talking about when we're talking about putting together this roadmap of this fund and how it can be built. They actually even identified several different lending products and how that would be structured. Some pre-development lending, some what would be mid-cycle lending, a lot of different ways to go about this. These are all not reinventing the wheel. This is coming from other markets that have created the exact same lending products. Obviously, we have specific needs here, specific utility costs, all of that, but it's not necessarily a new idea. Just to briefly touch on some of the things that they talked about. The first is they said to focus one jurisdiction at a time. So we came in with an idea to try to think about this whole thing coming on both the Kansas and the Missouri side, including 10 counties, blah, blah, blah. They said, you know, don't get ahead of yourself. Think about doing it within Kansas City, Missouri. And the reason they specified Kansas City, Missouri, say over Overland Park, as many of you know in this room, Missouri has a lot of not just policy, but subsidy programs, our utility programs, our PACE financing. The city of Kansas City, Missouri is actually in the process of hopefully adopting the 2021 code, has looked at, they're also in the process of adopting a climate plan. So there's just some good energy there around things that could be supportive, could work in complementary with what we're trying to do. But the idea is to grow it regionally. And the way that you do that is bring in a third-party fund manager, make sure that they have a specialization in energy efficiency financing, and that is a way to grow this to the region or to whatever geographic area we end up deciding. I will just emphasize, because I believe at some point in this 2.5-day process, somebody slammed their fist on the table and said, please simplify this application process. I'm so tired as a building owner or a developer trying to apply to something, and it's just so cumbersome. So just make sure it's really streamlined. So that's sort of a North Star for us, is just to make sure that it's easy to access. And then one of the things that I love to hear is they really bolstered the fact that we should build this energy efficiency ecosystem to support it, that if we're going to do something on financing, we need to also do something on technical assistance, and we need to also look at educating building owners and all of those pieces that I talked about earlier, because it just can't exist and won't be picked up as a tool if you don't have all those other parts and pieces. Okay, so I'm just going to switch gears real quickly before I let Jessica take over, which is just to talk about a few things, some of which this group has touched on. When you go last, you're like, oh, somebody stole my thunder. That's okay. So as I mentioned, City of Kansas City, Missouri is in the process of adopting the 2021 Energy Code. I will say, if anybody has a dog in this fight, there is concern that they don't have the votes from council to make that happen. So, you know, the more letters of support, the more that you can show that this is the way that we should move. I know that it is a very close margin right now. So we would love to see it adopted as it was written, without the weakening amendments that are always on the table. So just want to put that out there. As I alluded to earlier, we're seeing more national philanthropy interested in building retrofits. They're interested in it as an impact investment in which they can put money into energy efficiency, improve affordable housing, and then recirculate that money again into more projects. So just something we're seeing, just to name a few: Kresge, McKnight, Bloomberg. There's a few others that have started to put significant funding into that. And then just to hit on a few things with the federal funding. So this group probably knows by now some of the opportunities for energy efficiency in the American Rescue Plan, as well as in the infrastructure bill. I will point out, with the Inflation Reduction Act, there's a few things that make us really excited. Well, for one, the amount of money is unprecedented for energy efficiency improvements. We're also seeing things like the commercial buildings energy efficiency credit, which for existing buildings, if they reduce by 25 to 50% of their energy load, they can earn up to $5 per square foot of credit. So that just makes all of our numbers pencil a little bit easier. And then also we're seeing for new homes, that for any new home that is built, whether it's single family or multifamily, that they can receive up to $5,000 per unit for zero energy ready homes. And then lastly, $1 billion for affordable housing retrofits, particular emphasis on energy efficiency. And then lastly, the $27 billion greenhouse gas reduction fund, which establishes the nation's first green bank, which would work very well for capitalizing some of the conversations we're having around the energy efficiency fund. So I will just end there. Thank you very much. And I'll pass it over to Jessica.
Okay. All right, thank you. So I am Jessica Deem. I'm the interim director of St. Louis's Building Energy Exchange. Uh-oh. There we go. Uh-oh, I think it skipped. That's it. There we go. All right. So at the Building Energy Exchange St. Louis, we like to say that we're a hub of resources whose mission is to help the real estate community reduce energy consumption in buildings and position St. Louis as a resilient and carbon neutral region. So more specifically right now, the Building Energy Exchange St. Louis is really helping building owners understand and comply with energy efficiency regulations, such as St. Louis's benchmarking ordinance and the very newly established Building Energy Performance Standard. So benchmarking, very similar to Kansas City. In 2017, the city of St. Louis passed a benchmarking ordinance requiring large buildings to track and report energy and water usage. This applies to 50,000 buildings of 50,000 square feet or larger, and there are some exemptions. Reporting takes place using the Energy Star portfolio manager, which should hopefully be somewhat familiar, at least to this community and hopefully to our building owners as well. What is BEPS? So BEPS is the term we use for the Building Energy Performance Standard. So in 2020, St. Louis passed an ordinance requiring large buildings to consume energy at or below a standard set by the city. And again, much like benchmarking, this applies to buildings 50,000 square feet or larger. There are some exemptions for the types of buildings that tend to use much more energy, and so much more energy that we hope that those industries already have measures in place that it's in their best interest already to reduce their energy usage. This applies to existing buildings as well as new construction, and I will add that it specifically does not provide any exemptions for historic buildings, which is something that the St. Louis community is not necessarily ready for. We're used to, chapter 5 of the 2018 IECC technically exempts historic buildings, and that's should be on a case-by-case basis where compliance would, they say, threaten, degrade, or destroy the building. But in practice, I find that in the St. Louis area, so I'm a practicing architect and I work on a lot of historic tax credit projects. I find that in practice, there's no case by case. It's just kind of like all historic buildings are exempt. That seems to come as a surprise to the energy efficiency community. But with the BEPS standard, we are not allowing exemptions for historic buildings. So there will be some careful coordination needed between those projects and the historic consultants to figure out which energy efficiency measures will best fit a historic building. The BEPS compliance cycles timeline, most buildings have 4 years to comply. There are more lenient timelines for affordable housing and places of worship. And BEPS compliance is administered and enforced by the Office of Building Performance, which is under the umbrella of the building division at City Hall. Katarina is the director currently of the Office of Building Performance. The targets are set with advisory support from the mayoral appointed Building Energy Improvement Board, and stlbenchmarking.com is where you can find most of that technical information and actual information directly related to that standard. And as you can see on that screenshot there of the website, there is a BEPS program handbook that is yet to come out, but that's where the bulk of the information about compliance will be. There are 4 pathways for compliance with BEPS. I'm not going to get into that, but we just want to let building owners know that there's more than one way to comply, and there is some leniency for more complex buildings, mixed use and such, that may need a little extra help or a little extra time to comply. The targets were set by looking at the data for existing buildings in the region. So this graph is pretty hard to read, but it's mapping out the energy use intensity for each of these building types. And the target for BEPS was set at basically like the 35% marker, so that 35% of existing buildings would already comply, whereas 65% of the buildings, existing buildings, would need additional measures to eventually comply. And looking at that specifically for just one building type, multifamily, you can see how that target was set with a map of individual multifamily buildings that we had the data for. And this is just an overview of some of the more common building types and the EUI target that has been set for each of those. And it will eventually, they'll be reevaluating the targets as time goes on, but that's what we're starting out with. So why buildings and why BEPS? As we have said over and over today, buildings make up almost 40% of greenhouse gas emissions nationally and globally, and climate change is driven by greenhouse gas emissions. In St. Louis, buildings have an even bigger impact on greenhouse gas emissions. So 65% of greenhouse gas emissions are attributed to buildings in the St. Louis area, and that's just residential and commercial. Once you add in industry, you're looking at more like 80%. And you can see on the bottom right there, compared to other cities, St. Louis doesn't look so great. So we have a lot of improvement to do. Again, here you can see energy usage, the EUI of national averages. So, I guess that's the 35th percentile. The darker bar on the left is the national data. And then on top of that is the St. Louis data. So we are well beyond national averages, which is also why we used local data for establishing our BEPS targets. Again, the why. So climate change became very apparent in the St. Louis region this summer. With some, well, really Missouri-wide, but especially St. Louis, we had, major heat waves followed by record rain and flooding that flooded many homes and shut down our Metrolink. More bad news in the St. Louis region. St. Louis is a shrinking city, but the energy exchange in St. Louis likes to think that addressing climate change on a regional level is one of the most effective ways St. Louis can rebrand itself and increase St. Louis's ranking as a cleaner, healthier, more sustainable place to live, work, learn, and play. We do have a few things going for us. The greenest building is one that's already built. And we all know St. Louis has lots of those. Our proximity on the Mississippi gives us an edge in terms of logistics and natural water supply. And we've taken these steps in adopting these new ordinances that should give us a foot forward in becoming this more sustainable city. So when the Building Energy Performance Standard was adopted in 2020, St. Louis was the 4th jurisdiction in the country, and only the 4th in the country and the 1st in the Midwest to adopt this kind of forward-thinking sustainability program. So we are currently at the forefront and very proud to be ahead of the trend. But many cities are close behind. with benchmarking standards that we hope will become building energy performance standards. So working together with these cities, we hope that we can continue this trend forward. More recently, in just earlier this year, the cities of St. Louis and Kansas City joined 33 cities and states to form the White House Initiative National Building Performance Standards Coalition. And the goal is an advancement of legislation by Earth Day 2024. And that, what that looks like in each individual place may look different because everyone's at a different place in their journey. So can it be done? Can we meet these targets? If you've ever been to St. Louis City Hall, technically it is meeting the current standard set by the Building Energy Performance Standard, which may come as a surprise to anyone who's been inside St. Louis City Hall. So we say that if St. Louis City Hall can do it, then anyone can. And as we said earlier, historic buildings are not exempt. So what else can the Building Energy Exchange offer your project team? Again, we consider ourselves to be a hub of resources. Obviously, we're offering info sessions like this, how-to guides in partnership with New York and Kansas City. And we hope to continue providing contacts between building owners and industry professionals, energy auditors, and the people who are needed to make these energy improvements happen. We are putting together case studies to educate building owners, collecting all of the various information for financial tools, and currently conducting a pilot energy audit program. While BEPS is not a rating system, and that is intentional, we do also encourage building owners to look into other rating systems that have, historically guided the way towards energy efficiency. And I emphasize that simply because looking at energy efficiency alone does not necessarily create a great environment for people. So people live in buildings, and we need to be comfortable in them and have clean air and all of that. So it's not just about the energy efficiency numbers. So I'm going to run through a few quick case studies from some of our sponsors. So this is Guarantee Electric replaced just 73 fixtures in this parking lot, which resulted in an annual savings of over $12,000 and a simple payback of just over 3 years. At City Place 1, Gerald Mechanical Contractors installed building automation system for an annual savings of over $150,000, and the payback there was just 2 years with incentives of 3.7 years without. At Brower Hall, which is on the Washington University campus, Energy Resources Group installed various, conducted an audit, retro commissioning, and various energy efficiency measures for an annual savings of just under $150,000. And that was a 2.2 year payback with incentives, 3 years without. And if you see at the top there, this building doesn't look like it, but it's a new building as of 2010, Wash U style. And this was constructed as a LEED Gold building, but still just 12 years later, they were able to find enough energy efficiency measures to create this big of a difference in savings with a quick payback. Automatic controls, replaced pneumatic controls with automation controls. I'm not sure what the building was here, but in this case, they saw over a $400,000 annual savings and a simple payback of 2.9 years. So we hope with those case studies that everyone can see, and especially our building owners can see that the measures that they'll be implementing, BEPS will kind of be like what finally drives people to make these changes, but we hope that they'll see that these changes are actually, make sense for their bottom line, with or without incentives. But we also obviously want to make this information available as much as possible, with all of the incentives and the rebates that we talked about today. We've spent a significant amount of time making sure that building owners are aware of these, and we hope that they'll take advantage of them. Nearing the end here. So this is the remote energy audit pilot program that I touched on very briefly earlier. So we are looking for a few additional buildings in the St. Louis area, not the area, city of St. Louis proper, but ideally this would just be a common office building or an educational building. So not too much larger than our 50,000 square foot threshold. And we are going to provide a free remote energy audit. And this is not an ASHRAE level audit. And it's really meant for a building that has never before had an energy audit. So if you know anyone, building owners, or if you work with anyone that may be interested, you can contact us at that email address. And a quick thank you to all of our partner organizations. And thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you, ladies, very much. Do we have any questions online here? I guess one question I have for you is, where would you, coming back next year, what story do you want to be able to tell us? And we'll go ahead and start left to right there. You had to go the other way.
Well, from St. Louis, I would say, we're still very early in the implementation process for this building energy performance standard. So we'd like to say that reporting is happening and that building owners are hitting their targets and that people are seeing that they can comply with the simple compliance method and without too much trouble. So we just hope that it keeps moving forward without too much pushback.
Oh, yeah, great. So it's interesting, Josh has asked us to talk about a year ago about our organization. So I was thinking about that today, like, what did I say a year ago versus today? And I feel like we've done a lot in the last year just to kind of get some things launched. But I would say, and I feel like I need something with wood to knock on here, but I would really love to see the Energy Efficiency Fund built by this time next year so that we can strongly go after some of these public dollars, as well as, like I mentioned, philanthropic, and we're more and more seeing private lending entering this discussion once you can draw down the cost of capital using these other sources. So that's what I would love to see, is to really make this a reality and build that out. So.
I would say, echoing what Ashley and Jessica have said, but for our specific organization, I think we'd love to see an increase in compliance from building owners as we continue our program for benchmarking. I think we would like to see more like investment and more funds into like minor home repair programs, weatherization programs, just because we all know it needs to be done. So it's just like, we need to do it and like get into people's homes and build out the energy efficiency workforce. So, Ashley's org is doing a really great thing with their accelerator. And we actually had some of her, folks in the accelerator come to some of our training. So it's really a nice mesh of, getting people into these spaces where they can learn and get up to speed. So I think we would love to see all those things.
No other questions? All right. Thank you very much. So that does, and I will confirm that They have done a lot of work. If you didn't participate last year, haven't been tracking what they've done. There's been a lot of work done in St. Louis and Kansas City. And so I fully expect to see, maybe not the fund, because I've been looking, and I know folks on that table have been looking for quite some time to develop a dedicated fund for the stuff, but there's definitely a no movement. So thank you for what you're doing. As for everyone else, that was our last session. Thank you all for visiting us virtually and in person. December 8th, we will be in St. Louis for our third and final component of our policy series. That is on economic development. For those of you that are interested in that, I hope you join us either virtually or in person. Thank you very much for coming here today. We will be sending out a survey. We would be very grateful for you to take just a few minutes to fill it out. Tell us what you think we can do better. Tell us what you liked. We'll get you the slides once you do that. And it'll post online for a private link to YouTube so you can see the presentations beyond just the slides. So if there are no other questions or anything else, it's been a long, but I think very informative and engaging day. And that doesn't happen without you, our sponsors, our partners at Vidwest, Patrice and Travis, who actually, I say this now, I didn't introduce Patrice. For those of you who don't know, we hired Patrice just a month or so ago, 2 months ago. Dang. I'm still in 2020. I don't know what decade it is. 4 months ago, she is our PACE manager. So if you're interested in PACE and those type of activities, Patrice is the person to see. So thank you all one last time and have a safe travel home.